Last night was one of the most important Democratic debates. Took place in Nevada just before the upcoming Nevada caucus, which is considered very important. But once again, the Democratic debate was a massive dumpster fire. But for all the flaming trash, we did get little morsels of sweet, sweet goodness. Notably, when billionaire Michael Bloomberg called out Bernie Sanders for being a millionaire with 3 homes. And I gotta say, I think Bernie Sanders' response was kind of weak. But this highlights something I find truly interesting. You see, Bernie Sanders used to say, the millionaires and billionaires. And now he just says, the billionaires. Why? Because Bernie Sanders is a millionaire. And I got to be honest, I got no problem with that. Bernie, have as many homes as you'd like, make as much money as you like, and he's barely a millionaire. But Bernie, you reap what you have sown. You don't seem to differentiate between the ultra wealthy and someone who just barely has $1 million, because it may be surprising to a lot of people. But in order to be the 1% in net worth, you need $10 million. I know, it's a lot. It's crazy. And there are a lot of retirees, about 6%, who have over $1 million in net worth because they own homes that have accumulated in value over their lifetimes, over their lifetime, 30, 40 years or whatever. So I know $1 million is still a lot of money. But when you want to talk about influence in politics, shouldn't we be talking about someone who's got like $900 million or $1 billion? Well, Bernie didn't differentiate. See, back in the campaign in 2016, he used to rag on the millionaires and billionaires. And now, lo and behold, he doesn't say millionaires anymore. Don't take my word for it. NBC has the anti-Bernie smear, which we all love to see. Bernie Sanders is saying millionaires less often. One way his 2020 message has changed. Well, Mike Bloomberg called him out for it. And I got to say, it was good to finally hear someone call him out, because as much as I have no problem with Bernie having extra homes or being a millionaire, he is a Democratic socialist who used to rag on millionaires all day and night and then dropped the millionaire smear as soon as he became one. So what do you think's going to happen when Bernie makes money? I don't trust him. I don't think he actually cares about what's going on. I think he was just a naive guy who didn't understand anything about having wealth, sold a book, made $1 million and went, oh, I paid how much in taxes? I'm going to stop ragging on the millionaires. Now, what I do find even more sweet and juicy about this is the Democratic Party it's a dumpster fire. It's just flaming trash everywhere. The person who called out Bernie Sanders is billionaire Mike Bloomberg, who basically bought his way onto the debate stage. You all deserve each other. All right. At least Bernie Sanders was the only one who said superdelegates shouldn't decide who the Democratic nominee is. I'll give him that. But they're all hypocrites. Okay, Bloomberg bought his way on the debate stage and has the nerve to call out Bernie Sanders for being a millionaire with 3 houses. It's a fair criticism, but you're all swimming in a pool of flaming trash. So you know what? Let's read the story, and I want to critique Bernie's response to this. Daily Mail writes, billionaire Mike Bloomberg mocks best-known socialist in the country, Bernie Sanders, for having 3 houses and being a millionaire after he called for an end to capitalism. They're bickering over Bloomberg's billions and Sanders' millions descended into a fight over who owned more homes during a contentious debate where the entire stage of candidates ganged up on the former New York City mayor, and the Vermont senator found himself a target after becoming the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination. Bloomberg was defending his net worth, estimated to be around $64 billion. It keeps going up, huh? Pointing out he earned it through hard work and that he was giving his money away when Sanders argued the workers helped make that money. Quote, Mr. Bloomberg, it wasn't you who made all that money. Maybe your workers played some role in that as well, the Vermont senator said. And it is important those workers are able to share the benefits also. When we have so many people who go to work every day and they feel not good about their jobs, they feel like cogs in a machine. I want workers to be able to sit on corporate boards as well so they can have some say over what happens to their lives. How about this? How about you take responsibility for your life? And if you are unhappy being a cog in a machine, go do something else. You know what I can't stand about Bernie Sanders' argument is he's basically saying we're addicted to wealth and we won't give it up. I'll tell you this. Go live on a farm. Tell me how much you enjoy being a cog on a machine in a farm, waking up at 6 a.m. and going to bed at midnight. I'll tell you a funny story. After Occupy Wall Street, someone gifted land to a bunch of activists. And many of those activists went to go work on the farm. And some of them I knew quit within 2 weeks. The general idea was you get off the grid, you stop contributing to climate change and all that stuff, and you go do hard work on a farm and you live a more humble life. And many of them just outright skipped within 2 weeks. You know why? They said it was too much work. You wake up at the crack of dawn, you go to bed around midnight. It's nonstop work all day, every day to be able to have food to survive. Now, as a cog in the machine working in an office in a job you hate, you get a TV, you get a smartphone, you get a laptop, you live in luxury. That's what's crazy to me. You might have a crappy job, I get it, but have you ever been to any other country on this planet? You have so much wealth in America working these crappy jobs. But I'll tell you what, life is about more than whether or not you have a flat screen TV and an iPad or something. So if you're unhappy with your work, you need to pave that road in front of you. You can't just be put on the board by a government mandate because Bernie Sanders doesn't like the system. You have a choice not to work for these companies. No one's forcing you to do it. But let's get to the millionaire thing with Bernie Sanders. The former New York City mayor then accused Sanders, a self-decried Democratic socialist, of being a communist. I can't think of a ways that would make it easier for Donald Trump to get reelected than listening to this conversation. This is ridiculous. We're not going to throw out capitalism. It was called communism and it just doesn't work, Bloomberg said. Democratic socialists believe the means of production should be collectively owned alongside a democratic political system of government. Communism advocates the common ownership of the means of production and the absence of social classes, money, and state. Democratic socialism doesn't make sense because someone has to enforce whatever that is. So in the end, democratic socialism is literally just the same thing as socialism. They just want you to vote for it before they come and seize everything you own. Sanders, who is worth $2.5 million, according to Forbes, accused Bloomberg of taking a cheap shot. I agree with Bernie on this one. Communism is more of an authoritarian dictatorship. Socialism tends to turn into those. But communism is more of a callback to the Red Scare and stuff like that. Call Bernie a socialist. There's no reason to hide from it. They're basically the same thing. And when you do this, you give them the opportunity to back away. Let's talk about democratic socialism, not communism, Mr. Bloomberg. The two men represent the opposing ends of the Democratic Party. Bloomberg for the moderates and Sanders for the liberals. Are you kidding me? Is this the best the Democrats have to offer? A corrupt billionaire who bought his way into the debates and a socialist? Trump is going to landslide in November, dude. It's going to be McGovern all over again. It's going to be like the Labor Party crushing defeat. These people have lost the plot. Okay. Where's the line about the millionaires? The millionaires and the billionaires. Bloomberg, here we go. This is where it got good. Bloomberg didn't let up against Sanders, pointing out the senator owns 3 homes. That's amazing. What a wonderful country we have. The best known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What did I miss here? I got to give it to Bloomberg. I got to do it. I don't like Bloomberg. I really don't. I think he's a corrupt crony, bad person. But hey, someone finally said it. Now, I wish it would have come from someone with a bit more integrity, but fine, sure. People have been calling out Bernie for this for a long time. Now, I'll be the first to say, Bernie, go ahead, be a millionaire. He started a movement. He sold a bunch of books. He made $1 million. Congratulations, good sir. You're living the American dream. You bought an extra house. You bought a summer house. Bravo, good sir. America is great, isn't it? The only problem is that Bernie rags on the millionaires and the billionaires all the time. And as soon as he made that sweet, sweet green, what did he do? He stopped saying millionaires. Well, here's what his response was. I work in Washington, house 1. Live in Burlington, house 2. Like thousands of other Vermonters, I have a summer camp. Which tax haven is your home? Not an answer. Not a good response. Bloomberg then responded with New York City, thank you very much, and I pay all of my taxes, and I'm happy to do it because I get something for it. The first debate featuring Bloomberg found the former mayor defending his record on race and gender amid his defense of the billions he made as a businessman in New York. I never thought the Democrats would elect a billionaire because they view this, they're typically people who are like the billionaires shouldn't exist. I mean, that's where they're at right now, especially with the far left. Bernie's response was bad. I'm sorry, Bernie. Like your answer says nothing to me. Oh, what's that? You work in Washington, so you bought a house there. You live in Burlington, so you bought a house there, and you bought a summer house too? Yeah, Bloomberg's criticism was apt, bro. You own 3 houses. There are people who work in Congress and the Senate. Well, probably not the Senate, because those people are all millionaires anyway. But there are people in Congress who can't afford rent in Washington, D.C. I mean, at least AOC just renting an apartment. But buying a house? Well, I work in Washington. I should buy a house. Oh, come on, dude. You own 3 houses. How many houses do you need? You can get a 1-bedroom for when you're working in Washington, D.C. You don't need to buy a house down there. Houses in DC are ridiculously expensive. Congratulations, dude. You're rich. Bernie doesn't want to embrace it, but he dropped millionaires from his message. NBC News talks about this. They say that he used to knock on the millionaires and billionaires. He's not saying that anymore. Hypocrisy, man. Dude, if you have $900 million, you're still a millionaire. And you can use that money to heavily influence politics. This is what's crazy to me. The moment Bernie entered the bottom rung of the millionaire class, he stopped saying millionaires. So Bernie, you can't compare yourself to, you with a net worth of 2.5 million to a dude who's got 999 million. Didn't J.K. Rowling lose billionaire status because she gave away too much money? She's still worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no comparison between someone with 900 million and you, Bernie, but you still drop the millionaire thing. Why? Because you are one. Imagine what would happen if Bernie earned $1 billion, just one simple billion. All of a sudden, he's going to be like, Bloomberg's not so bad. We got to go after the ultra wealthy, not the billionaires. Yeah, we get it, man. The moment you became a millionaire, you no longer wanted to criticize the group you became a part of. And we see this all the time. When people become rich, all of a sudden their views change on how taxes should be done. People who make a certain amount of money become more fiscally conservative for a lot of reasons. I noticed something interesting with global protest and revolution. The people who protest wealth inequality are the people who typically make less than the median. And the people who make more than the median reject all of these things. There are outliers. There are super wealthy Hollywood celebrities, who go around protesting with the Occupy Wall Street types. But it's very easy to predict whether or not someone's politics will be socialist or capitalist. It depends on how much money they make. Here's the thing. Americans are all extremely wealthy. Every single one. Every single one. Homeless guy sleeping on the streets. He's got a lot of problems, but he is wealthy. And I mean it. Because Americans don't realize how spoiled they are. Now, of course, I don't want someone to be homeless. Of course, I think that's below the standards of living for our country. And of course, I want to make sure we can solve these problems and get people a better standard of living. Just because America is better than everywhere else in the world doesn't mean, of course, I recognize that we should increase the standard of living for everybody and get some base level, healthcare, and you should have a place to live. But let me tell you, man, why don't you go visit Egypt, Morocco? Why don't you go visit Eritrea? Why don't you go visit Libya? And then you want to talk about wealth and poverty. A homeless guy in this country can stand in a street corner muttering gibberish and every 10th word say cheeseburger. And guess what'll happen? In no time at all, maybe an hour or two, someone will walk by and hand a cheeseburger to that man. I'm not even exaggerating. I've worked with homeless nonprofits. I've worked with nonprofits. I've lived in big cities. I have seen people sleep on the street with a sign that says need money. That's it. Sleeping. And in a few hours, they have a coffee can full of money. I knew a dude who was making hundreds of dollars per day sleeping on the street. I'm not kidding. They would go downtown Chicago, sit up against a light post with a coffee can and a sign saying, I need help. And they would wake up several hours later with a coffee can full of money and dump all the change into one of those counting machines. That's called being a wealthy American. Now, I don't want these people sleeping on the street. I want them to have a better life. I want people to be taught how to fish so they can support themselves. Just getting cash from people is no way to live. But the point is, Americans are extremely wealthy. We all are. Bernie Sanders has shown us something very important with the way he describes the problem in this country. The moment he entered their class, he no longer had criticisms for them. And that to me shows that he probably, for one, didn't understand how wealth actually works. And he still doesn't. When he calls for the wealth tax, it doesn't make sense. They say, we're going to use the wealth tax on the billionaires to pay for health care. Okay, so after you've taxed Jeff Bezos, in 2 or 3 years and now he's worthless, where's the money coming from? It doesn't make sense. Sorry, your plan doesn't work. And how are you going to tax stocks? You can't do it because his net worth is high. He's got to pay money he doesn't have. These people are just they're not mentally sound. They don't understand how this stuff works. But of course, like I said, Bernie rags on the millionaires. Let's read the story from ABC News. They say as a Bernie Sanders basked in a New Hampshire primary win, he reeled off the familiar tenets of his political revolution. The speech after the Granite State helped make Sanders the early favorite in the 2020 Democratic race sounded familiar to those who have tracked the senator since he stormed onto the national stage during the 2016 election. The Vermont senator declared, "Healthcare is a human right, not a privilege." Sanders called to cancel student debt. He promised to take on Wall Street, drug makers, and fossil fuel companies. But it lacked one of the signature phrases voters have associated with Sanders and his Brooklyn accent, a knock on the millionaires and billionaires. Corrupting the U.S. political system. Recently, his rhetoric has focused more on the wealthier end of the U.S. populace. We're taking on billionaires, and we're taking on candidates funded by billionaires. As Sanders himself, a recently minted millionaire, brings his campaign to pivotal nominating contests in Nevada, South Carolina, and beyond, he continues to drill into what he calls the corrosive influence of the wealthy and corporations on U.S. politics. Even so, he has tweaked parts of his message since his 2016 campaign. So they go on to point it out, basically, we get it. Quote, "We are going to unite together and defeat the most dangerous president in modern history of this country," Sanders said after his victory in Tuesday, New Hampshire, blah, blah, blah. The Democratic debates show how his messaging on millionaires has changed. While the Sanders campaign has thrived in grassroots organizing, the events offer candidates some of the best chances to reach a national audience. In at least two of the debates against Hillary Clinton during the 2016 primary, Sanders targeted millionaires and billionaires, according to transcripts. Millionaires and billionaires are pouring unbelievable sums of money into the political process in order to fund super PACs and to elect candidates who represent their interests, not the interests of working people. Sanders has targeted billionaires as often as ever in the height of 2020 Democratic debates that began in June, but he has not said millionaires during events according to transcript searches. Now, I'll say this. I don't think it's necessarily because Bernie Sanders is himself a millionaire. I think it's because Bernie Sanders probably started getting donations from millionaires, and all of a sudden he had to contend with the fact that people in his wealth bracket were supporting him. What's he going to do? Is he going to kick back and say, I don't want any of this money from millionaires? Well, he can't really. I don't know if Bernie Sanders is still accepting money from millionaires and billionaires, but he himself is a millionaire, so maybe that's why he has to drop it. Of course, he's going to accept his own money, right? And now you can see the problem with Bernie Sanders' rhetoric. In my opinion, Bernie Sanders can still rag on millionaires while pointing out he is one. His response to Michael Bloomberg should have been something like this. When Bloomberg says, "What a great country we live in, where the best known socialist in the country is a millionaire with 3 houses." Bernie should have said, "I made that money in the past couple of years after living decades making only just above 100 or so thousand working in the U.S. Congress and Senate. In the past couple of years, Bernie started a movement which allowed him to sell a book and make that money. He's only been a millionaire since 2016, in his 70s. So I personally have no problem with that. And if Bernie was honest about this, he might get some respect from me, but he's not. Instead, he says, well, I work in these places, so I got to own the house. And of course, like thousands of others, dude, how many people live in Vermont? A couple million? Oh, and thousands have summer homes. Great. Because we all can relate to the millionaire senator who has a summer home. That's your response? I think we can see what's going on here. I think if Bernie Sanders ever made $1 billion, he would drop all of this. He'd become a capitalist overnight. Of course, Michael Bloomberg's like, I give my money away. I'm helping people. I made all it through hard work. You know, we get it. Rich people give money through philanthropy and all that stuff. Apparently, Bernie Sanders didn't. I don't know. Okay, maybe I don't have the data pulled up. And Bernie just barely cracked $1 million in income back in like 2017 or something. But all of these people claim to be doing the right thing. All of these people earn their money through some legal means, for the most part, and then try to give back a little bit. Bernie is no special case. He's just on the outside looking in. And this is the funny thing about him and all of these socialist types, all of these far lefties. They're typically privileged young people who support Bernie Sanders. So they're making decent salaries. They live in luxury. I mean it, global luxury. Maybe not the best in America, but they've got fancy apartments. They've got access to top quality healthcare. They do. You know, people want to complain about whether or not they can get access to quality healthcare. But let me just remind you, you today have better healthcare than Rockefeller did back in his time. One of the biggest, the most wealth ever amassed in the history of the planet. And that dude couldn't get the healthcare you get today. And I'll tell you what else. Poor people in this country have air conditioning and refrigerators. I'm not saying we should be okay with extreme poverty, because poverty is relative. We want to lift people up to a certain standard of living. Totally respect that. But I want to make sure you all remain humble and recognize the great things you have. Bernie apparently doesn't. He's always going to be on the outside looking in, always complaining about those who have more than he does, up until they let him in the room. You see, he was looking through that window of the club of millionaires and billionaires, complaining and yelling to everyone outside. It reminds me of that episode of Family Guy, you may have seen it, where there are people who are striking at some store for low wages. And Peter goes to the store and is offered a job, and then immediately comes out, and they're all like, what's he going to say? And then he says, you are trespassing and you are being instructed to leave. That's how I see Bernie. He's outside this big mansion looking at all the millionaires and billionaires, and he's rallying everyone outside saying, these people are corrupt. These people are corrupt. And then they let him on the first floor. And they say, Bernie, you can come in the first floor. And then what does he do? He says, the billionaires upstairs. Yeah, I get it, man. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.